Welcome to Alchemy, the podcast for HR professionals who are ready to experience what's possible from the inside out. I'm your host, Sarah Maud, former HR insider and transformational coach. And I'm here to guide you into a new paradigm of HR leadership with the science, the energy, and the insights that create true, lasting transformation. So subscribe and join the movement, and let's create the future of HR together. Hello and welcome to another episode. And I'm starting this episode with something that I saw yesterday on LinkedIn. It was a post called HR Bingo. And this bingo card invited people from the HR community to share, what did you deal with at work this week? Now, some of the examples on the HR bingo card were didn't have time to eat lunch, became somebody's therapist unpaid, got pulled into a meeting with zero context, got pinged before your first sip of coffee, had more than one person ask if something is anonymous, got asked to handle an urgent issue that wasn't urgent, explained the same policy for the fifth time, heard, I didn't know we had a handbook. Now, if you're listening to this and you work in the world of HR, maybe, just maybe, you're nodding your head. Maybe you're thinking, yep, I've experienced that. In fact, I experience that most days working in HR. But here's what strikes me about this post. This post had 837 people like it. 75 comments of other people from the HR community, all agreeing, all saying, yeah, crikey, I experience that most days. 46 people reposted it. But what I saw when I read this post is here is a huge opportunity for change and transformation. Because there's something here that is creating this reality that isn't working. That there's valuable data here. Data that we can use to our advantage to create change, to create a different culture, to create a shift in who we are showing up as HR leaders in the organization. Because what I'm seeing a lot of on LinkedIn at the moment is these kinds of posts saying, this is what it's like to work in HR. This is the reality. Look at what it's like to experience being in this profession, the kind of things that I'm having to deal with week in and week out. But what I'm not seeing is this is what I'm doing about it. This is how I'm actively creating a different way of being. This is what I'm actively doing to create a different way of working. This is what I'm doing to influence the culture. This is what I'm doing to be an HR fire starter instead of an HR firefighter. Because my assertion is that it's a far more empowering place than sharing posts that say, this is how it is. And what I also know is that when it comes to telling this story, is that it's these kind of stories, these kind of posts that reinforce the status quo, but without that empowering stance of actually, what can we do as an HR community to create change? Because if you're explaining the same policy for the fifth time, well, what is it about that policy that isn't clear? Maybe it's not that user-friendly. Maybe it's full of jargon that people don't really understand. If you're hearing, I didn't know we had a HR handbook or an employee handbook, well, what's going on with the onboarding process? What's going on with the internal communication that lets you know that people don't realize there's a handbook? What can be done to change the awareness so that people do know and they know where to find it? If more than one person has asked whether something's anonymous, well, what I see is that psychological safety matters to these people. And if they're experiencing feeling fear, if they're feeling insecure about things not being anonymous, well, what does that say about the culture? If you're not finding time to eat, and I say this with love, that's not an HR problem. That's a self-prioritization problem. And yes, you might be getting pinged before your first sip of coffee, but it doesn't mean that you have to respond to that ping. It doesn't mean that you can't sit there and reflect on your day ahead and enjoy that coffee. You don't have to respond to a notification or an email or a Slack message just because it comes in. You know, if you feel like you're becoming people's therapist within the organization, what does that point to? You know, are the managers equipped to be having these conversations with their own team? And if they're not, do you need to invest in mental health awareness training for managers? Are managers skilled with the right listening skills, the right coaching skills to be able to support people? Are people aware of what resources they have access to internally that they can utilize if they need mental health support? If you're getting pulled into a meeting with zero context, what can you do before you agree to attend? What questions can you ask about the nature of that meeting so that you can make an informed decision, a decision that comes from agency about whether this is the best use of your time? And maybe it is worth your time, but if you haven't got space that day, what can you do to manage expectations and put healthy boundaries in place? Every single one of these bingo squares is an invitation to ask, what does this need me to do differently? What can I influence here? What needs to change? What does this need our organization to do differently? Because if we keep telling the same story, nothing changes. It just becomes our experience. And it feels like we're just doing the same thing again and again and again. And I would suggest that the most empowering question any HR professional can ask themselves not is, why is it so hard working in HR? It's, who am I being while I am doing? Who am I being while I am doing? And I want to acknowledge something bigger here, because a big part of change, in fact, one of the most fundamental steps to change, is self-awareness. And we can only ever experience something from our current level of thinking, from our current level of consciousness. And sometimes we genuinely can't see the wood for the trees. Not because we're not capable, not because we don't care, not because we don't want change, but because from where we're standing, this is simply all that we can see. And when that's the case, We just keep doing what we've always done and expecting a different result. So, my intention with this episode is to gently invite you to reflect on these stories, to create some headspace, to think about actually what are the things in HR that I am coming up against on a weekly basis, on a regular basis. And what can I do differently to be the change that I actually want to see? Because what I'm seeing here is that the PR that HR puts out into the world over social media, it matters. And right now, a lot of what I see positions HR as a profession that's overwhelmed by the very culture that it has the power to shape. It talks a lot about being the unsung heroes. Well, maybe it's time to start singing a different song, to show people what you're doing, actively doing to change the very culture, to change the reality. And I know that that's a bold thing to say, but I believe in what HR leaders are capable of. I've seen it. I work with them. I was one for over a decade. So the next time you're looking at what it is that you're dealing with this week and you are seeing the same things coming up again, you're in the same conversations. What if you were to use that as data? What if this was an opportunity for you to get really good at noticing, oh, okay, there's an opportunity here for us to start doing things differently. What needs to happen to prevent these things in the first place? And the people who are finding their way into my HR inner circle, which I'm building right now, are the ones who are asking different questions. They're looking at who they are being when they're carrying out this vital role in an organization. They're looking at how can I be a change agent? They're not waiting for the culture to change around them. They are the fire starters. And that's the conversation I would love to see taking off on LinkedIn. So if this episode has landed, I'd love to hear what came up for you. And don't forget to remember to subscribe, to like, to share this with somebody in your own HR community that can create this conversation, that can create a ripple effect. And until next time, start being the HR fire starter.